Bruch Helper once gave a lecture on creation in Genesis. And it was the most brilliant lecture I've ever heard about Genesis 1. I thought no one ever understood it properly until now. It was great. But he had a throat thing, so he had to chew gum while he was giving the whole lecture to keep his throat moist. So people missed this brilliant, what he gave them, the greatest insight they could have had into the creation story in the Bible. And after I said, well, how'd you like the lecture? I said, why did he have to chew gum? So I have this in my mouth, but and I don't have as brilliant a lecture as he did. But, so you guys lose all around on this. So. Well, that was an unusual introduction for a lecture. But here we go. The title of this lecture is, Do You Believe in Magic? We could use some magic this week. I don't see how I cannot at least mention that this has just been a horrible week for everybody, for the whole country. And given that I'm coming to you from Georgia, where some things happened in the last couple of days, they're very horrible. I can only give it a moment of silence, because you said it, whereof one cannot speak, thereof one should be silent. So the topic today, which was planned before that, so it may or may not ever touch the current events, both in the health of our planet and the horrible human condition, interhuman conditions in our planet lately. Just when people like me thought we were lucky and had lived past the worst of it, and we're seeing a whole new time. So let's try magic as a way to take our minds somewhere. My father had many different jobs, and one of them was he was a magician for a while. It was before I was born, so I never saw him perform, except at birthday parties for his kids. He would do some easy stuff for us. And he taught me how some of the tricks are done, and that's always interesting when you see a magic trick and you're taught how it's done. And he and I would watch magicians on television together and try to figure it out, how they did it. And one of the most famous magic tricks, I think Houdini invented it. Houdini, a Hungarian Jew like me. And like Tony Curtis, who played Houdini in the movie. So there you go. You've all probably seen one or another variation on this trick. It's a classic magician's trick. There's a trunk. They open the trunk. It's empty. The magician stands in the trunk. They handcuff him. They take out a black sack and they pull it up and put him inside the black sack. The assistant comes over and grabs the top of the black sack and invites people from the audience to come up and tie knots of their own recognizable knots along the top of the bag. And then they drop him down into the trunk. They close the lid, and they have ropes and chains that go all around all the sides of the trunk. Then the assistant, it's always a beautiful woman, because that's, So the beautiful woman stands up on top of the trunk, and she holds up a curtain or a cloth or a ring of some sort to hide everything. And she holds it up, but just has her head still at the top of it. And she says, 1, 2, 3, 4. And as she goes down, you suddenly hear the magician's voice saying 5, 6, 7. And then his head comes out. And then he drops the curtain and he's standing without the handcuffs, without the bag, on top of the trunk. And then they take off all the chains and they open up the trunk, and there's the assistant, and she's inside with the handcuffs on, and she's holding the bag in her hand with all the knots still in place on it. It's a classic trick. And so the way that works is, the first part is the handcuffs. That means nothing. They're the magician's own handcuffs. I mean, they can get out of those like that. So that's just to add a little pizzazz, you know. And when he gets in the bag, he reaches in his pants. It's usually a tuxedo. He pulls out a black bag. So they put him inside a black bag, but he's got another one identical to it in his pants. And he takes his black bag and he sticks it up through the top of the other black bag. And this is where the assistant, of course, is the key, is the real magician there. The assistant takes the two black bags and holds them together with her hands around them, and then invites people to tie their knots. So they're all tying knots around the bag that he's not in. See, and then she lets the last knot rope go a little bit around the other so the two stay together. And then they push him down into the trunk. Then they put all the chains and ropes around the trunk. But those don't mean anything, because all those would do is if there's a false side in the trunk, he can't kick it out because the chains are there. But if the false side opens in, the chains have nothing to do with anything. And it does. The false side opens in and he gets out and he closes it. So while she's got the bag up and they're tying the knots on it, he's already got the handcuffs off. When she gets up standing on top of the trunk, he's already out. And she starts going 1, 2, 3, 4. He's getting up and he's standing next to her on top of the trunk and takes the thing and she starts getting down and he says 5, 6, 7, 8 and he drops it and she's gotten into the trunk and put on the handcuffs. And then they open up the trunk and she's holding the black bag that still has all the knots in place right on it. Okay, good. I couldn't do it, but I know how it's done. Now that's just a trick. That's not magic, it's a trick. And a lot of people, maybe most of us, have that fascination that when you see a magician do a magic act that you want to say, yes, but what's the trick? Because you know they're not really, you know, fragmenting into the air and then coming back together on top of the trunk. If you saw the movie Lily, was one of my favorites as a kid, and then I re-showed it to my children when they were kids with Leslie Caron, this innocent French young woman who lives with these people at a circus, a sideshow, and she falls to the beautiful, handsome French magician. And when she first meets him, he says, ah, and he goes, well, and he makes like a flower come out. And he hands it to her and she says, oh, it's a trick. And he said, oh, you knew. and that's our understanding of magic, but not in the Bible. Magic in the Bible is real. I'm not making any case now about whether any story in the Bible involving magic is true and happened or not. I am telling you, though, that the way the story is told, they are dealing with magic as real, not as my dad's tricks. So let's look at the cases. There aren't that many, but there's enough, pretty much just about right to fit into a single meeting like ours. In Genesis 30, at the beginning, there's the magic of the mandrakes. There are these two sisters, Rachel and Leah. They're both married to the same man, Jacob. Leah's had kids. Rachel can't have any kids. She's been infertile. And Leah has some mandrakes. Now, you may know mandrakes are regarded at least as an aphrodisiac, and in some cultures are regarded as magical and able to produce fertility. Now, none of that is said in the text. All that's said in the text is Leah has these mandrakes, and Rachel asks her for some of her mandrakes. And Leah says, isn't it bad enough that you've got our husband? He loves you the most. You got to get my mandrakes too? And she said, but she makes the trade. She says, I'll give you the husband. Tonight you sleep with him, not me, and I get the mandrakes. So Leah tells Jacob when he comes in and he's headed for Rachel's tent, she says, no, left, not right. I bought you with the mandrakes. So he goes in and he's with Leah that night. And sure enough, she has 3 more children after that, 2 sons and a daughter. But most important is the very next sentence after that report is, it says Rachel got pregnant. So it would appear that it worked, that the mandrakes have this power. If you've ever seen mandrake root, they say it looks like a little human with particularly prominent genitals. Sometimes I can see that, sometimes not. So all of you, if you just Google mandrake, hit images, you can look at a lot of different mandrakes and see if that works for you. Anyway, it worked for Rachel. And she then gives birth, and that's where Joseph comes from. Now, is that magic? Or is it that mandrakes actually have that power? As far as we know, they don't in any empirical way. So yes, I think they understood that story to be magical. But if you say it doesn't exactly say it, all we know is she got the mandrakes and then she had been infertile and now she can have a kid. But it never actually states the connection in the biblical text, so I don't like to overstate my case. Next case after that comes up later in that very same chapter. Jacob, you remember in the story, had worked for 7 years to get to marry Rachel, and then it turned out he got Leah, so he worked 7 more years, so he gets married to Rachel and Leah, and he works 7 years for each. And now it's the end of the 14 years, and he goes to his uncle / father-in-law, Laban, and who's the father of Rachel and Laban, and he says, okay, what's the price now? And Jacob says, okay, here's my price for working for you. I'll tend all the sheep and the goats and all. I'll watch the herd. But any that are born all white are yours. Any that are born with stripes or marks or brown or spots or any of that, those are mine. Now, if any of you have ever seen a herd of sheep, a flock of sheep, a herd of cows, a pride of lions, and what was the word for flamingos? A fabulous or something?
I don't think of it.
Who knows? It's with an F. There's some fancy word. It's not just a flock of flamingos. But anyway, I just wanted to show you that Bible scholars sometimes are worldly and know other subjects besides our own. And when you see sheep on a hillside, oh yeah, that's where I was, you'll see that most of them are usually just solid white. So this seems like a good deal for Laban.
Flamboyance.
A flamboyance of flamingos. You see the things you can learn here? And so what Jacob does is, when the sheep and the goats come down near the waterside to mate, to make love, what he does is he takes these sticks, seemingly phallic symbols, sticks, and he cuts different patterns and shapes in them, the stripes and the dots and the browns, and he sticks them up in the water in front of the sheep when they're mating. And then when he does this, then the babies that these sheep and goats have come out with those patterns on them. And then he keeps separating off the ones that have the patterns and all the stronger ones in one group and all the white ones and the weaker ones in the other group, so that gradually he comes to have possession of all the good sheep in the flock. And, if you would tell people that story's in the Bible, that's one of the ones they go, no, that's not in the Bible. I go, no, it's there. It's Genesis 30. Just go look. So the question is that magic? Is it that Jacob has performed a magic thing that if creatures see a certain shape and pattern in front of them when they're mating, that then their babies will be born like that? And are we all now, we're going to start holding out, if any of you have grandchildren on the way or something, or you expect any, you put up pictures of beautiful Hollywood people or Einstein or I don't know who you want your kids to be like. And so is that magic, or was that simply their notion of genetics, of heredity, that they may have thought this really works, that you can impact the way the offspring will look that way? Or should we understand this, as some people do, as a classic wisdom tale, that Jacob has some kind of knowledge that other folks in the ancient Near East don't have, and he uses this for the purpose? So there's the wisdom explanation. There's they had a different understanding of heredity, correct or wrong, and there's the magic explanation. If you ask me, it's magic. It's supposed to be understood as magic, but I won't fight for that. But those are our first couple of cases. But we don't have to worry about the third case because there's nothing to fight about because it's magic. And it's the third case, and that's about the Egyptian magicians in the beginning of the Exodus story. The Egyptian magicians are able to turn sticks to something. People talk about it as a snake, and it gets confusing because before this, there's a scene at the burning bush where Moses' staff turns into a snake. But in this case, it is not Moses' staff, it is Aaron's staff. And it is not a snake, which is Hebrew, a nachash. It's a tanin, which is Hebrew for a dragon. A tanin in modern Hebrew means a crocodile. But that's just, I mean, we just derived, they saw crocodiles and Israelis needed a word, so they picked a word. But in the text, a tanin is first mentioned in Genesis chapter 1, in the creation story, where it says when God creates the world, he creates these giant taninim in the oceans. And then you don't hear about them again until these Egyptian guys come up with them. So you got to picture this because people get it all wrong in the books and the cartoons and the movies. They always make it like cobras and things that appear. No, these are primordial monsters. These are dragons that the sticks become. But of course, Aaron says, you know, my stick is bigger than your stick, and his snake, his creature, his dragon, whatever it is, eats their dragons. Now, Aaron's staff became a serpent of some kind. The Egyptian staffs became a serpent of some kind. What's the difference is the question. That's a classic question people ask. If the Egyptians, they're magicians, it says they're using enchantments or secret arts, whatever it is, and they make it happen, how is that any different from what Aaron did? And people say, no. When Aaron does it, it's a miracle. When the Egyptians do it, it's magic, even if it's real magic. And you go, well, what on earth difference does that make? What exactly is the difference? Well, if it's miracle, it comes from God. If it's magic, it doesn't come from God, it comes from somewhere else. And you go like, oh, you're saying that there's a whole realm of power in the universe that is apart and separate from God and almost as good? That's an interesting place where most people don't want to go. But it's not just that, because after all, the next trick is turning water to blood. And the Egyptian magicians can do that too. And the next one after that is making frogs all over the place. And the Egyptian magicians can do that too. And then later, Moses and Aaron bring lice all over Egypt. And it says the Egyptian magicians aren't able to do that one. And then it says they bring boils, and it says the Egyptian magicians get the boils. So you see the progression of the power duel here, wherein they can do the first three tricks, they can't do the fourth trick, the fifth trick impinges on them. But the story is a story of a magic, and it's a question of whose power is greater. All right, so we get it that Aaron and Moses, or God's power, is greater, but still we're going to come back to the question of what is this though? What do these magicians do? What did Aaron do? And what's the difference? But there's a few more before that. The next one is the Nehushtan. It's in the book of Numbers, where the children of Israel got angry at them, which is a big surprise. And God sends these snakes. He lets snakes loose, and they're fiery snakes. They're saraf snakes. And when they bite you, you die. So the people, they're all dying. And so Moses makes a bronze snake. And there's some kind of something going on there, because a snake is a nachash and bronze is nechoshet, which probably got to be the word for bronze because it was the color of snakes, or it could be snakes got to be called that because they were the color of bronze. I don't know which is the chicken and which is the snake here, you know. And the snake that Moses makes, it's bronze sculpture of a snake, and he puts it on a pole. And he puts it up in front of the people. And if anybody is bitten by a snake, if they just look at the snake on the pole, they're cured and they don't die of the snake bite. Some people say that is the first case of sympathetic magic in the Bible, where a thing there can have an impact on reality. That snake comes to be known as Nehushtan. By the way, this has nothing to do with the American Medical Association, whose symbol is a snake on a thing, and probably not with the Asclepius in classic literature snake. It's more than one person can think of a snake on a pole. I'm sorry, it just happens, you know. We always have to look for influences. You know, oh, where did they get that? You know, where did the Jews get monotheism? They thought of it, man. You know. No, they got it from Akhenaten. No. Anyway, we'll come back. We'll do monotheism someday. So that snake doesn't come up again until several books of the Bible later, in the book of 2 Kings. In 2 Kings 18, during the reign of King Hezekiah, who's this good king who's getting rid of all the stuff that's not, you know, good kosher religion, and is destroying high places and statues, all kinds of things. And it says he chops up the Nehushtan. And you go, what? The Nehushtan was made by Moses. And a king of Israel would smash it? And it says, yes, but the people had been offering incense to it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're worshiping it as a god, but they are treating it as some sort of fetish, recognizing its power. And they're burning incense to it, and it's forbidden. You're not supposed to offer incense except at the tabernacle. So he smashes it, and you go, but couldn't he have just hidden it, or, you know, buried it under the temple, or, I mean, it was made by Moses, you know, but no, he does that. So it was apparently at a level historically, actually, where there was a non-Moses priesthood in power who really wanted to be rid of that, and they were the priests who supported King Hezekiah. Or else there's another reason. But in any event, this sacred thing that had magical powers is destroyed. Okay, so now let's bounce back, because I said I was starting with the events in Genesis 30, which was the mandrakes and the sheep and stuff, and I go, wait a minute, the first magic in the Bible is way before that. We had it in our first meeting. The first magic in the Bible is the Garden of Eden. Right? There are these two trees in the Garden of Eden. One tree, you eat from it and you live forever. The other tree, you eat from it and you can discern between good and bad. Now, don't you think most people today, if they showed you a tree and if you ate the fruit from that tree, it would give you some power, you'd say, oh, magic. But no word for magic occurs in that story, but you know, you eat from the tree and there you go. Did I tell you before about what the fruit of the tree was? I don't remember if I've spoken, and all of you nod or okay, and there's new people anyway. So just so you'll know, what is the fruit of the tree of knowledge is a very famous classic Bible problem. And my daughter, for a while, went to an Orthodox Jewish day school where they had this magnificent art teacher. And she gave them all an assignment that each kid should paint some scene they wanted out of the Bible on silk. And they made these beautiful, beautiful things. And my daughter, Jessie, did the Garden of Eden. So when she got to the tree of knowledge, she had to decide what's the fruit on the tree of knowledge. Now, she knew it wasn't an apple, that's Milton, that's not the Bible. And so she wanted to capture that it's a magical tree. So she made all different fruits grew from the same tree. So she got bananas and pears and apples and everything's going from the same tree. So I thought this was really cool. But a couple of kids in her school did not think it was really cool. They insisted that what she had done was absolutely wrong. And they said that all the medieval rabbis who wrote commentaries on the Bible had said that it was an etrog. So she insisted that, she said, well, look, this is my picture. I can make it what I want. But there were a couple of things wrong with this. First of all, those kids are absolutely not right. It was not an etrog. That is not what most of the medieval commentators on the Bible say. If you look in Rashi and some of the others, they came up with some really great ones. Rashi has that it's a fig. And you go, why a fig? And then you realize, of course, because then they cover themselves with fig leaves. So when God says, have you eaten from the tree I told you not to? You see what idiots Adam and Eve are now as witnesses against themselves. They were wearing the proof of what they did. So that's really cool. And that's also, that's what they put fig leaves, on classical statues in Rome and also over the genitals, they put figs. And I'm told la figa in Italian is a euphemism for woman's genitals. So it's even a double thing. And okay. And it's an allusion, of course, back to Genesis. So when I did my commentary on the Torah, when I came to the tree of knowledge of good and bad, I just put in there what my daughter had done. I said, my daughter had all different fruits going from the same tree. So if my commentary will live over the centuries, then people in future times will know my daughter Jessie's conception of the tree of knowledge, and those two kids can go to hell. So anyway, they shouldn't have been mean to her. Mean to my family, you pay a price. So the best explanation I heard, I think, interpretation of what the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad is it was, ready? The fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad. On an apple tree, you get apples. On a pear tree, you get pears. On the tree of knowledge of good and bad, you get tree of knowledge of good and bad fruit. And it wasn't like any other fruit. It was what it was. And that somehow seems to escape everybody as to, a likely explanation of what that was. But still, let's go with Jessie's because she's my daughter and I love her. Now we come to the case that Kate took up a while back, which was the case of the adulterous woman, the Sotah, the suspected adulteress. And remember, the case was that we won't go through the whole thing again because we did it, and now we're all learned about that. A woman suspected of adultery, they take this container and they put in words of a curse written on parchment, and they dip the parchment into the water of the container, which it says is holy water, a term that only occurs there and nowhere else in the Bible. And then they take dust from the floor of the tabernacle and they mix that in there and they mix it all up, and she drinks it. And then it turns out her guilt will be shown by her being pregnant, which apparently nobody but me ever thought was the meaning of this text. But the important part is, if she's guilty of adultery in thus getting pregnant, then the drink will produce a curse on her. So the Sotah ceremony is absolutely a magical ceremony. Drinking this substance will have magical effects, but people misunderstand. It's not that the effects are that it says her belly swells and her thighs. That just means she gets pregnant. The drinking the stuff doesn't make her pregnant. The sex she had made her pregnant. The drink puts a curse on her. And all of us, if we'd hear a story someday about something happened where a curse is put on somebody, we say, okay, that's a magic story. Where else is there magic? Towards the end of the Bible, the last book of the Bible to be written was Daniel, my least favorite book of the Bible. I have this idea, by the way, that everybody should get to pick one book of the Bible, and that's not in your Bible. Right? There's 39 books in the Old Testament. Everybody always says there's 24 or 25. That's not true. There's 39 books in the Old Testament. You can count them. And the last one to be written is Daniel. And in Daniel, 3 guys go into a furnace. It's on fire, and they come back out, and they're okay. In Daniel, people are all at a big party given by Belshazzar, and suddenly words appear on the wall. Some people think it's that you see a hand writing them. That's where you get the term, the handwriting is on the wall. But you actually, it's not clear if anybody sees the hand. They just suddenly see these words appear. And the other case in Daniel is Daniel spends a whole night in this den of lions, and he comes out fine. Now, are those miracle stories? Are they magic stories? What are they? Well, just a couple more and then we'll address that. One is the prophets Elijah and Elisha. They're both able to do a lot of tricks. And this stands out because these two are prophets who don't have books of the Bible named for them. There is no book of Elijah or a book of Elisha in the Bible. They are rather characters in the books of 1st and 2nd Kings. Characters, persons. And Elijah tried to come to my Passover Seder this year, and we all went, whoa, 6 feet. You know? So Elijah and Elisha do some strange things, and they stand out because if you read the 15 books of the Bible that are prophetic books, the 15 books about the name of the book is the name of Amos, Hosea. We did Jonah and Joel last time, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, all of those. There are almost no miracles in those books. The prophets of the Bible do not do tricks. At the beginning, they did in the story, like Moses, of course. But the prophets very rarely do miracles. That's just not what they're about. For them, it's their words that establish their prophecies, not magical actions. But Elijah and Elisha aren't prophets out of prophetic books. They're prophets whose stories are being told, like Moses is. And Elijah, can have fire come out of the sky and burn up a sacrifice. And he's obviously a man of power. And at one point, he's going to transfer his power to Elisha, his successor. So the two of them go alone to get away from all these other prophets who keep running after them. And they come to the Jordan River. And Elijah takes off his cloak and he hits the water with his cloak and it splits. And you go, whoa, this isn't Moses in the Red Sea. I mean, the Egyptians aren't chasing you. Just you two guys want to have a private chat so you can make the Jordan, but it does. It splits. And since it's a river, not like the Red Sea, right? A river just keeps flowing. So the water keeps flowing and just stops like at a wall and then it gets dry after that, the rest of the way down. And then they go across and then the water starts running again. And Elijah and Elisha have this private conversation. And then, Elijah goes up in a whirlwind. And from this, people get the idea Elijah is the prophet who never dies. Alternatively, that could be the story of his death. I thought that is too hard for most people. And as he's going, he takes off his cloak and he casts it to Elisha. So now Elisha puts on the cloak and he's going back and he comes to the Jordan River. Wow, is this going to work? And he looks, there's no S on the back of the cloak, He takes it off, he hits the water, it works. So then he comes back over, and after that, Elisha does a lot of tricks that are actually, a lot of them are even better than Elijah's tricks. And they're more personal. There's one where it says Elisha goes along and he sees this group of people, and a guy is sitting by the side of a river, and he's really sad. And Elisha says, what's the problem? He says, well, I was swinging my axe, and the axe head flew off the axe handle, and it went down into the water, and it's gone, and I feel really bad because it was a borrowed axe head. And Elisha says, pas de problème, I am a prophet. And he takes some wood, and he throws it into the water, and the axe head floats to the top of the water. In another story there, he, like Elijah before him, can multiply foodstuffs. So this woman also has some grain and some oil, and he multiplies it and makes it enough for them for a long time. And it should be obvious to those of you who know your New Testament, a lot of the miracles of Elijah and Elisha are done by Jesus as well in the New Testament, the multiplication of food. And the weirdest one that I used to tell to my students joyously and was my favorite story in the Bible until I had children is the one that these kids are running along, a whole mass of children, and they're running after Elisha and they're making fun of him because he's bald. And they're shouting, "Go on, bald man. Go on, bald man." I'm not making this up. The Hebrews, "Aleke, go on up, bald man." Well, as you can imagine, I'm a little sensitive on this subject. And Elisha was especially sensitive, and he turned toward them and he cursed them in the name of God. And 2 she-bears came out of the woods and tore apart 42 children. Now, I used to tell this, and all my students would start laughing because they were all single and hadn't had kids, and they didn't quite get the significance of this horror that takes place. And you're like, why is a prophet doing a thing like that he has that power? Do you want to say this is a miracle? Do you want to say this came from God? Well, then he's doing magic too, because it really works. And it's a curse, and it happens, like the curse with the woman in the Sotah case. And somebody believes that curses really work. And curses go hand in hand with magic. And if you don't believe me, just go read or see a movie of Harry Potter. They do curses. So let's get there. So what's the question? What is the difference between magic and miracle? And people have been asking that question since ancient study of the Bible. What makes it magic when Egyptian magicians do the exact same thing that Aaron does and you say it was a miracle? And I was very lucky. For 30 years before I came here to Georgia, I was at the University of California, San Diego, where I had a brilliant doctoral student, Shona Delansky, who is now a professor in Canada and at Claremont, which is Ottawa. And Shona, as her PhD dissertation, which later became a book, was about magic in the Bible, about magic and miracle. And if you want to get at the title of the book, it's a good title. The title of the book is Now You See It, Now You Don't. So she beat that movie to that title. And she went through all these cases and addressed it and looked through Greek and Roman literature as well. And her conclusion, with which I completely agree, I mean, I was persuaded by her, that the difference between magic and miracle is nothing. There is no difference between magic and miracle. The exact same thing happens, and it happens in the same way. And the difference biblically, though, is in biblical terms, magic is forbidden. Jews aren't allowed to do it. It describes what happens if you perform sorcery, if you do things like consulting the dead, or any kind of magic at all. The punishment for that is execution. The most famous one of those is, the law says in Exodus 22, you shall not let a witch live. And a lot of women over centuries have been killed over that. But just so you all know, that really is not what the text says. In the Masoretic text, the Hebrew of the Hebrew Bible, which is the text that we have from the Leningrad Codex in Russia, and eventually goes back to Babylonia. That text says a witch, but that's a machshefa. That's the only occurrence of the feminine of that word for a magician. If you look in the Greek text of the same verse, it doesn't have the feminine, it has the masculine plural, which means you shall not let sorcerers, male or female, live. It wasn't aimed just at women. Darn it, there's enough. We do enough to women in the Bible. We've got those passages that we should admit are there without having to pick out extra ones as well. So these witches and sorcerers are forbidden in the Bible. But again, it's not that they didn't think magic worked. They weren't forbidding my father from doing the trick with the trunk. They weren't forbidding me from doing a couple of dumb card tricks. I know one brilliant card trick. If any of you ever around, I'll show it. It's really great. Learned it from my father. But I was trying to think, how could I do it for you? This just isn't the right equipment to do the trick. But I can do that, and it's okay, because that's just a trick. But real magic, they believed in it, but it's forbidden, and you're not allowed to do it. But it does work. In brief, a Jew can't go to Hogwarts. It's forbidden. I just can't help about that in the movie, Daniel Radcliffe, who plays Harry Potter, is half Jewish. And he shouldn't be going to Hogwarts. I'm sorry. But I mean, he's just the actor. He's not the Harry guy, so. But technically, really, if there was such a thing, Jews couldn't go to Hogwarts. So what should we make of this? They really believed magic was possible. And they really told stories, you've now heard all of them, where real magic happens, not magic tricks, magic. And then in addition to those, there's all the stories you know well of miracle stories in the Bible that we don't bother to argue whether they're magic or miracle, because they're obviously visibly what we usually mean by a miracle. And those, basically the 10 plagues are miracles. And you'd only argue on the first couple because the magicians could do it too, whether that's magic, not miracle. We, to this day, have this tremendous fascination with magic. Real magic, especially real magic. I'm honored to be a friend of Alice Hoffman, who wrote the book Practical Magic and the fabulous movie that was made from it. And then she wrote a prequel, a novel called The Rules of Magic, which is also really good. And I was her consultant on her book, The Dove Keepers, which is about women, these women at Masada. Because as you know, historically, really, the only witnesses that we had who survived, according to Josephus's account, were some women who were up there. So Alice, who's written so many novels of a woman's perspective, was really interested that the Masada story, our only source of what happened, is these women. And she addresses magic as being part of their lives as well. And then her latest book, The World That We Knew, has magic in it as well. Someone makes a golem. I love her books, and I think the success of her books, and so many of them are bestsellers, people are really, really intrigued by that. And whether we individually believe in real magic or not, we can still read the stories, whether they're in the Bible or in a modern novelist, and say, wow, this is great. And I read a treatment of Woody Allen's films. Excuse me a minute. I read a work on of Woody Allen's life in films, and it said that a common thread that covers not all of Woody's films, but a tremendous number of them, is the notion that life itself as it is, as we know it, is meaningless, is sad, is painful, and that it would take magic to change that. So if you look at the number of movies by this man, of the serious movies and the comic movies, there's disproportionately magic in them. The simplest, easiest one is the scene that everybody remembers from Annie Hall, where the pretentious professor says he's an expert on Marshall McLuhan, and Woody says, oh yeah, well, wait a minute. And he goes over to this column and he pulls out Marshall McLuhan from behind the column, and Marshall McLuhan says, sir, you don't understand my work at all. How a person like you got to be a teacher at university is beyond my imagination. And Woody looks out at the audience and he says, boy, if life were really like this. So the point, it's only magical that it happened. But if you think that's stretching too much to get to magic, you don't have to stretch on all the others. In The Purple Rose of Cairo, one of the characters in the movie steps off the screen into the audience. In Magic in the Moonlight, which is one of my favorites, there's a question running all through the movie of whether extrasensory perception and communication with the dead and clairvoyance are possible. In Midnight in Paris, one can travel through time to different periods of one's fantasies. In Stardust Memories, there are these creatures from another world who come here and they're addressing this filmmaker who is Woody, and they say, oh yes, up on our planet, we really love your movies, especially the early funny ones. And in Match Point, victims of a murder both appear to the murderer afterwards. In Play It Again, Sam, the ghost of Bogart comes and is a consultant. In Love and Death, Woody is executed, and then he comes back and appears to Diane Keaton. And in Scoop, Woody and other dead are on the boat that takes you to the realm of the dead. In A Midsummer Night's Sex comedy, there's magic in the air all around because it's Midsummer Night's Dream, but done Woody-esque. In Zelig, the man Zelig is able to transform into all other different human forms. In The Curse of the Jade Scorpion, there's a magician who has these unreal powers of hypnosis to get people to do things they wouldn't normally do. So, okay, is that enough examples? That's like 10 of his movies. Now, I know there's more because he made a movie a year for 50 years, which is unmatched anyway. And but if you think of the non-magic films, in all of them, life is pretty sad, and the hero usually loses at the end, and not because he's tragic, but because he's pathetic. So in Manhattan, everything goes wrong for all these lovers and all, and especially for Woody through his own doing. And at the end, when he's trying to win back the beautiful young girl who had been his lover, she's going away for a while, and she says, well, don't worry, you should have a little faith in people. And the camera comes back on his face, and the end of the movie is just his face, where he goes through about 10 different expressions. You should have a little faith in people, where he has shown no faith and been unworthy of faith the whole time. Broadway Danny Rose, the good guy is the loser. Interiors, a movie about three sisters and their complex parents and pain and adultery that run all through it. And Hannah and Her Sisters, a movie about a family with three sisters and difficult parents and pain and adultery that runs through it. Bullets Over Broadway, they actually made a musical of that one. And but again, the hero discovers that he doesn't really have talent and he has no great future as a playwright. That was his dream. Celebrity, the hero, it's Kenneth Branagh playing Woody Allen in that one. And he's a loser as well. Sweet and Low Down, one of the best of his movies. I'm sorry for those of you who didn't think you were just going to get a rattle off of Woody Allen's career today, but I'm making a point here. That Sweet and Low Down, which is a magnificent, I would say, film done as a faux documentary of a jazz guitarist in his life and the meaninglessness of it all. Melinda and Melinda, which is a group of writers sitting around a table at dinner, each writing a story about this woman, Melinda, and half of them are saying it's tragic and half are saying it's comic, and so you see the same actress being both Melindas, and you see the story go back and forth being told as tragedy and as comedy. Vicky Cristina Barcelona, the two heroines end up back the way they started. Have I ruined basically all of Woody's movies for you yet? You'll sue me. And recently, Blue Jasmine, which is, this redone Streetcar Named Desire, people say, and which ends painfully and loanfully. So, is magic real? We long for it. Why do we go see movies and read books about real magic? Is miracle real? Are there things that happen that are not explainable by scientific method? This is my father's ring. When he died, this was the only thing of his that I really wanted, and I've worn it ever since. And in the year after my father died, I was living in San Diego, and I went to the wedding of my friends, which was in, they're all Santa something, what do you call it? Not Santa Barbara, but Santa Cruz. And we were all gathered before the wedding at this house. I was talking to this pretty, very nice, very bright woman there. And we talked for a long time. I found out she was married, and And after the wedding, it turned out that I was staying in their home. So she and her husband put me up. And I looked and on my hands, I didn't have my rings on. And in those days, I didn't sleep with my rings on at night. I would put them in the drawer. And I'd always put them on in the morning. But it would be impossible that I would go all day and not notice if I had forgotten my rings. And it was always this ring on the right hand and a different ring that I no longer have on the left hand. And so I called her and her husband in and I said, did either of you notice if I was wearing any rings? So I don't know about rings. I did notice one ring. It's on your right hand. I noticed it because it was a very striking ring. I liked it, while we were standing there by the fireplace talking in the house. And I said, describe it. And she said, it was a black oval onyx in a gold setting. Oh God, I've lost my father's ring. So I'm distraught and we look everywhere, couldn't find it. And I flew back home to San Diego and it was in the drawer next to the bed in my bedroom. Now, you've all heard people tell stories like that. Almost everybody has either had one of those experiences or they know someone who's had that experience or their uncle had that experience or something. And sometimes it's not believable. Sometimes it's somebody, though, who you trust. You all trust me, don't you? Why would I make this up? It does seem that disproportionately these things happen to people after a death. A lot of people who've lost somebody they loved have some story about their parent or loved one that happened. After my wife died, my daughter Alexa used to have this pin from Girl Scouts that was given to all the mothers of the Girl Scout troop. And so when her mother died, Alexa kept this pin. It meant a lot to her. And she was over at her friend's house and she was showing it to her. And she took it out, and when she got home, she realized she didn't have the pin. And she called her friend and they searched the house, and they searched the floors, and they looked all over. The pin was gone. And she was distraught. She'd lost her mother's pin. And then she opened her purse and it was pinned to the inside of the purse. She did not do that. Her friend did not do that. I can't go beyond that. My other daughter, Jessie, was using a computer in the house in that year. And you know how Macintosh computers have those square plugs that go into the wall? Well, it just broke into the wrong pieces, not along the lines, just broke when nobody was touching it in the wall. So she was distraught. It was her mother's computer and this strange thing had just happened. So she came running up the stairs, yelling, upset. And as she did, at the same time that happened, the horn on my wife's car started blasting. It was out in the garage and nobody had been in the garage. So the next night, my wife and I had twin computers, so I gave my charger to Jessie, and she used that for a computer the next night, and it broke too. Randy had a set of candlesticks, these beautiful wood hand-painted Shabbat candlesticks that we got in Jerusalem, where she took me once to see them in Mea Shearim, where she showed me what I was going to give her for her anniversary. And I gave them to her, and she lit those every Friday night. And they were wood, so the tops of them started to get burnt from the candles over the years. So we have a friend in South Carolina who's a wood maker. He made the bookcase behind me, and he said he'd fix it. He'd make something nice. So it took a long time for him to get back to us. And she died in between. And he called me one day, hysterical, distraught, because he had kept these candlesticks in his garage was his wood shop, his workshop, and he'd left them standing all this time on a table in the workshop. And he came home and the garage door had been open and had come down on top of one of the candlesticks at the entrance to the garage. And you know how garages, they're built like the automatic garage. If they hit something, they're supposed to go back up, but it didn't. It stayed there and it pinned the candlestick in position, and the other candlestick was outside, rolling around outside the garage. Nobody had been there. Nobody broke in. Nothing was stolen. This just happened. Candles are kind of funny. I went and was sitting in the backyard of my friend Marianne, who had been one of Randy's best friends, my wife Randy's best friends here. And we were sitting in her backyard at night and had a glass container with a candle in it. And as we sat down, we're talking about Randy, it suddenly exploded on its own. And if you say, okay, but that happens sometimes. So when I married Janet, who is my beloved now, when Janet lit candles one night and used Randy's candlesticks, one of the candlesticks just fell over, pointing at Janet, as it were. You say, okay, but no, let's stop this already. But no, we use those candlesticks, you know, the Jewish candlesticks come with the little glass containers and you put the candles inside them. So we were using those one night and it burst. You say, well, the heat of the candle must have done it. So it burst. And you say, but okay, what made it burst the second time and the third time that this happened? That Janet's Shabbat candlesticks would burst with the candle in it. So she stopped using them for a while. She got these big, thick glass bases to put the candle in. And she put the candle in that, and that broke too. Now, I've just given you 4 or 5 or 6 examples. And these are all ones that happen to me or people close to me. There got to be so many of these that I've had to write them down because I can't remember them all. They're now over 30 on the list, things like this. I'm a scientist. I believe in scientific method. Some of the people who these things had and wrote to me about it are medical doctors or scientists. We all believe in scientific method. We believe in empirical evidence, but these things happened. So what should we do? I can still believe in scientific method. I believe there are real reasons in the natural world for these things to happen. We just don't know everything yet. There's still much to learn. So this doesn't make me turn my back on science or, believe in real magicians or whatever. But the attraction to all of that, and to me, it's somehow a comforting thought that there is maybe something like that real going on in the universe, because I think Woody's right. The way things are going, we need something big here. And if I have a lesson from this, it's not that you should just all go out and start learning to perform magic. It's to recognize our struggle and that the sources of extra supernatural things could be at least a comfort to us. But you have to believe in the magic of a young girl's soul and believe in the magic of rock and roll and believe in the magic, and it'll set you free. That's it for today.
Thanks so much. Well, I guess we don't really have time for questions today, but so store them up for next week, right?
Okay.
And
I don't usually go to the end, but when I get into my stories.
I don't think anybody's complaining. So next week, the subject is going to be the destruction and rebuilding of the temple. So probably with fewer personal stories, but we'll see.
You'll have to see.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Be well, be safe.